say their piece about the topics, and we'll keep it going. So
Okay.
a little bit less structure like I usually send out of who talks when. Just sort of chime in when you have something to say, what you want to add. Free form like that.
Bueno.
So, okay.
So when you pull up the MLS standings, since nobody played, everybody's just alphabetical. And I'd like to point out that the Colorado Rapids are currently listed at first in the Western Conference.
Look at you with that.
Screenshot that, because I'm not sure it's going to be true for most of the season.
You got a star up there. That's good. Yeah.
I got all kinds of weird things I'm sure just flashed up there. Let's see here.
Well, Vancouver's at the bottom, which is about as expected. Okay. And by top tier teams, we're meaning for fantasy purposes. Yes.
Correct. Yes. All fantasy wise. I mean, they may overlap, and that is perfectly okay.
Okay. I feel like that's.
And Mike joined us. I did not know if Mike would be here or not. He doesn't have headphones on. Yes, he does. Can you hear us, Mike?
Yes.
Awesome. I did not know if you were going to make it or not.
So I'm probably not. I just wanted to test it and see if this actually worked while y'all are actually gone.
Oh, fantastic. We're actually streaming, so a treat to anyone who's watching right now.
Hello, everyone.
An unexpected visit from Mike. I wasn't sure, because I know you said you might drop in on us later.
Yeah, I'll probably drop you in like 15 or 20 minutes, but I actually wanted to make sure the Zoom thing actually worked. So, hello and goodbye.
Hello and goodbye. Excellent. Oh, look at you, Blayne. Nice little message here. All right, so I'm going to start putting this out on social. Not really paying attention to any chat or anything right now.
Reid, are you gonna tag stuff? I mean, I'll look it up, and I was gonna retweet it.
Am I going to tag you all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tag you guys in it.
Okay.
Let's see here. Home. Scroll up. What's happening?
Reid, do you have a link for the YouTube coming out too?
Yeah, I'm getting it up right now.
Okay. It never shows up on mine as that we're live. Oh, wait, there it is.
Do you have a Twitter, Spencer?
I do. Yeah, it's at Spencer Savage 2.
Savage 2.
You can also put Ashley in there too. She's ready to listen to it in the car. She's just now leaving her parent meeting conference right now. So,
fun.
Yep, another hour until she gets home.
Oh, all right. It is on Twitter. I'm going to retweet it from the MLSFI account as well. So feel free to do that. And then I'm going to post on Reddit, and then we'll be ready to start. If anybody has joined us, welcome. And we'll be going very quickly, but we got to get the mandatory social going. Got to get them views going. I guess that's how the kids say it these days. And over here, link post. Don't need a text post there. Link post, please. What did I call that?
My phone just auto-corrected "talk to y'all"
Wow.
with the apostrophe.
Got a southern phone.
I mean, I say y'all. That is St. Louis, Missouri time influencing my language. That and Blayne, are you in the part of Missouri where cool beans is regular jargon?
Used to be.
Used to be, but no longer.
Yeah, that one doesn't come up as much anymore.
Okay, because I feel like
middle
that
school
was
and high school, that was all over the place.
Okay, because I feel like that was a good barometer for like where the boundary layer between Missouri and Missouri happens. I feel
No,
like that's.
I go with the other diagonal. I'm on the pop side of the line.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
because that diagonal from just north of Springfield, kind of off west of St. Louis. Anybody under that says soda, and anybody above that diagonal says pop in Missouri.
Mm-hmm. But so if I go further north to like the side of my family that's in northern Michigan, so there's a soda to pop boundary, and then there's a pop to soda pop boundary. But like the soda pop does not border the soda boundary. Is there? If we go further south, like almost into Arkansas, does that happen?
No. If you go far enough south, it stops being soda or pop, and everybody just calls it Coke.
Okay.
And that's a Texas thing, so that's a Texas influence
Even
coming
Pepsi?
up. Yes.
Yes. I'm from the part of Kentucky that says you all instead of y'all. So it's basically just the middle part. A very
Two
small
words,
spot.
hyphenated, one word?
2 words. 2 separate words. You all, not you guys or youans or y'all or anything like that. It's just you all. What are you all doing?
This is the content people want,
right?
Reid.
No, exactly. Yes, this is the craziest. Forget about fantasy. This is MLS Dialect Central with whatever's going.
Matt, I'm in the part of Missouri where it's Warsh too.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not gonna work.
That doesn't happen.
Well,
okay. So
I'm
is
from
Nashville is Nashville pop, or would Nashville be soda pop?
Nashville.
I don't know. I think that's going to be a Nashville question that we're going to have to figure out.
No, that's fair.
All right. That's amongst
That's
the
fair.
other questions that we have about Nashville FC live listeners. If you are from Nashville and know what your jargon for the sugary carbonated beverage stuff is, please chime in. Do we have a chat, Reid? Is there a way for people to communicate with us?
Yes, we have chat in YouTube right now. So if you are listening and somehow are not on YouTube, you could be listening to the podcast. But if you're watching right now and not on YouTube, you're magic, because I don't know how you'd be doing that. But there is chat, live chat in the YouTube right now. We have 8 people with us. It is on Twitter. It is on Reddit. So you guys can share that out. And let's get to this content that people have come here for. So we're going to talk fantasy. Thank you who's here with us right now. We've got Skylar. Oh, Nashville would probably be Coke. That's right. Skylar is now in Kentucky, but formerly he has traveled the South, but he is a fellow Kentuckian at the moment. All right, well, let's get this thing started. We're going to do the fun thing for the podcast crowd, and then we'll move into our conversation. So, quick drink. And here we go. Hello and welcome to the first 2020 preseason episode of the MLS Fantasy Insider Podcast, our preview of the Western Conference. This episode is brought to you by the Where in the World is Bobby Warshaw Society. No, thank you. Actually, brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and our amazing Patreon supporters. You guys are so awesome. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and I am joined by my partner in fantasy, to borrow a phrase, Blayne Riffle. We'd also like to welcome our special guests, Matt Pollard from Last Word on Soccer, and Spencer Savage filling in for his wife, Ashley, who had a last-minute schedule change. How is everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Ready for the season start.
That's right. Yeah. We are all ready to go. Now, I have to start out real quickly and say a couple things. One, if you are listening to us right now through SoundCloud, those of you joining us live on YouTube don't get to hear the intro music anyway. You're probably wondering, wait, isn't that the same intro music from last season or 2 seasons ago? Yes, that is the answer. And I am still getting the new soundtrack put together. Our very good friend Simon is getting us a new soundtrack, and I'm still collecting some of the audio. So it is coming. It's a process that takes a little bit longer than I thought it would. So my bad with that. But if you do have any suggestions for what you would like to hear, please send those to me. I don't know where they all are. So if you can give me an episode, that's even better. And if you know a timestamp, you're my new favorite person. So, but that's going to be coming. So we are planning on getting a new intro coming out pretty soon. The second thing I have to say is right here at Spencer. So I know that Ashley said she had a parent-teacher conference come up. Not you, though? She was like, you can go and be on soccer. I will take care of the kids tonight. Enjoy.
Yeah, no, it's a little different. She got a new job now. So she's actually the head of the after-school program at a gifted school in Seattle right now. So she's kind of the head honcho and doesn't get off until West Coast time pretty late. So me being pretty flexible and somewhat knowledgeable at soccer, she said, fill in because I'm not going to get home till 8 p.m. Western time. So thanks for bringing me on the pod, guys, and I'm glad that my wife's not here, so I get some little action in front of the guys.
Well, let's not talk you down. I mean, we know that your wife is on here often and has told us about how she beat you in fantasy, but she has said that you have some fantasy cred of your own, and I'm going to give both you and Matt a second to let new people know who may be listening to us why we have invited you all out tonight. And I guess, Blayne, you and I should do the same in case these are new people. But go on, Spencer, we'll let you start. Matt, we'll let you go after right that. Just who do you represent tonight on the show for your fantasy expertise?
For sure. I'll start. So first and foremost, Seattle season ticket holder since day one. My name is on the scarf on the side of the stadium. We've got a permanent but I started fantasy the day that it started, and I was living in Alaska. And when you're in Alaska, there's nothing to do except for watch soccer for me. So I kind of got Ashley into it, and her analytical mind went absolutely crazy with it. But she has beat me every single year that we played with each other. But the one thing that I will take as my little expertise is I've always had the highest pointed captain every season in our little fantasy group. So I may not be able to pull the whole team through the entire year. But if you're looking for that one gem in the rough, I think you guys had mentioned a couple of times on the pod, but previous Mr. Savage blue on a couple of those. But no, then there's some times where you get Yosef that has a double game week. And I tend to find those moments. So I'm also real quick representing Ashley. What she would say is she is a member of Switch the Pitch, which is on Twitter. It formerly was MLS Female, which is a fantasy Twitter handle that helps everybody, but it's all female run. So it's a MLS soccer that all female run, and Ashley has been kind of promoted to the fantasy expert for this upcoming season for Switch the Pitch. So really, really cool platform. All women, really getting some representation within the soccer community and reporting community, trying to get a bigger name for themselves. And so hopefully Ashley will be able to get her press pass to be able to go down on the field this season, talk with some players, and see what's going on from a different perspective. And then I'm hoping that that's not going to help her with her fantasy stats as well. But so that's me. So
Great.
For sure.
Glad to have you, Matt. You know a little bit about press passes, right?
Yes, I do. I've been a credentialed member of the Colorado Rapids Independent Press Corps since 2016, but my soccer writing days go back to 2014 when I was still finishing up school in St. Louis, and I was at the first ever game for St. Louis FC in their USL iteration, and obviously I'm very excited about the team in one form or another coming into MLS. I am the site manager and Colorado Rapids and partially LA Galaxy beat reporter for LastWordOnSoccer.com. I am the primary host of Last Word Soccer Club Radio, general MLS and US soccer stuff there from myself and a few other contributors to Last Word on Sports. And then I also, as of this is my third year now with Rapids Rabbi holding the High Line with Rabbi and Red. My MLS Fantasy credentials go back to 2013. I think I've had at least 3 top 2 percentile, so I guess 98th percentile and up in my time at MLS Fantasy. 2 of those were in the top 1%, one of which I think was in the top 100 overall for what the total number is, but I'm usually at the very least in the top 5 to 7% when I'm usually playing this game. And obviously I met Blayne through the interwebs, and then eventually he was writing for Last Word at some point, and that's how, I'm good at MLS Fantasy and nerding out and making spreadsheets for which center backs I should be starting this week, which on some level makes me useful to you guys here at MLS Fantasy Boss. And longtime listeners will know I am a staunch, totally getting stuck in believer in the switcheroo philosophy. So if anybody has any questions about that, or anytime I'm picking my lineup and everything, I absolutely have at least 1 or 2 of those planned on any given week, assuming that there's a good number of fixtures and every team's playing.
So Blayne, a little quick rundown about yourself before we get into the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Matt hit it. I've been an independent writer since about 2014. I worked with Vavel for quite a while, and then came over to Last Word on Soccer with Matt for, I'd say, 6 months to a year there. And I was doing primarily fantasy with Vavel by the end of it, and I switched over to Fantasy Boss and then moved right on up into this. I like to say this is the biggest application I've had of my math degree since graduating college. In all my career, I've done everything else but use my math degree, so this gives me a chance to say I've got a legit use for it, doing all the stats and things. But yeah, this has been Reid, is this year 3 or 4 with you now? This has been...
You with me?
Yeah.
3 or 4 sounds right.
Yeah, time goes by so fast. I love this community, and that's why we keep coming back.
As for myself, like I said, I'm from MLSFantasyBoss.com, founded the website around, 2014, when I started playing fantasy as well, and I wanted to find a community that had similar resources as to what I was seeing for FPL when I was getting involved in that, and I didn't find anything, and so I said, well, forget it, I'll make my own. So I did. Had the website, had some charts, just steamrolled from there. We have the Reddit community now. We have the Discord community now. We have the podcast now. This is the 6th year of this podcast. Its first year was a couple different guys who were running this. Now it's 6 years under our banner, so 7 years in total for this podcast. It is the only podcast that I know of that is 100% focused on the fantasy game, and it's a real pleasure to be involved with this. My goal, sort of like what Matt was saying, is I'm usually around in that top 100. That's always where I'm shooting for with my fantasy goals, is trying to get in the top 100. And I really feel like my skill, though, is assembling some great people to come and talk about fantasy and just share the knowledge. And so it's a great community. If this is your first time watching us, welcome aboard, or listening if you're in SoundCloud. But again, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining. Please stay tuned throughout the rest of the season. It's a fun game, and I hope you enjoy what we're putting together. Right now, segment 1. We've got 3 segments for you tonight. Segment 1, the current state of fantasy. So, no news just yet about what fantasy is doing. So, what do we know? Nothing. Very little. I spoke with Ben Bear today, actually, trying to find out some information. Ben is one of the editors over at MLS Soccer, and he is very involved in the fantasy side as well. And he let me know that they don't have a date yet, but it's coming soon. So that's all I've got. If we're able to get Ben onto the show, I know it's not much, but it is coming soon. If we're able to get Ben onto the show, which he has been so gracious to do for the past several years, we'll get him on here to talk about things that have changed. I know that we all had a lot of feedback that we sent into MLS Soccer last year. MLS Soccer, I guess is what I just said. But I just said the website goes through my head whenever I say those things. But we sent back to Ben and everybody a lot of feedback. So with hope, they're still working on getting some of that implemented. It's a crazy time for them as well. But all I know for sure right now is that it's coming soon. So we're going to do, what are we hoping for? So Blayne, what do you hope to see? This is still like fantasy and just a weird, just make believe time. But one thing, if you can see one thing in this season, what would it be? Hopes and dreams is what I called this on Twitter, and you guys on Twitter were just vicious with this. So I'm hoping you're a bit more relaxed.
I mean, we talked about it yesterday. I've got 2 because they're the 2 rules I wanted to see last year. Yeah. I was actually really happy with the game last year. I liked the way it was. The 2 complaints I had were really what kills it for casuals. And the 2 things I really want to see are fixed budgets, where you don't have to fight with everybody for your price rises and everything. Everybody gets the same budget. It goes down to a more skill game. And I want to see highest single game for a double game week. You get one score, but 2 bites at the apple if you take the double game week players. Those are the 2 things I want to see. It would open up the game to casuals, break it out a little bit, give them an easier time to get in, but not be so reliant on the double game week. And I think that would help so much.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot on the show last year, just different ways to make it more approachable with different scorings and different systems and just different ways. We did a lot with that. Matt, what about you?
I think kind of similar to Blayne's first point, I'd like to see some level of management of the price inflation, both for your general roster budget, like people just stashing in bench players, who are randomly starting at like 4.5 million to start the year just to get that roster value up. Because, if you miss one of those, or if you don't get one of those high price values, basically that locks you in. So similarly for Blayne, but I think it affects regulars as well, where it's just, it's halfway through the season and Carlos Vela's $14.5 million. And basically everybody's just stacking the most expensive players that all have really good value. So whether that's putting in price limitations on the actual roster budget side, or just managing the price increase and decrease based on form and number of points and everything, I'd like to see some form of metric on that, because I think they did a good job 2 years ago of actually managing the increase of that. But now it's just gotten out of hand in terms of that front. And this is going to be a little outside there, but I would not mind seeing the league. You continue to get points for the secondary assist, the hockey assist on a goal. But for my money, I would say the primary assist has more value. So I don't know if you make the primary assist, 4 points, because I think it was 5 points for a goal for forwards and midfielders last year, and then 3 points for an assist. I would like to see a primary assist valued more in terms of point value than the secondary assist, whether that's increasing one, decreasing the other, or a combination. I'd like to see that, but I realize that's a very stickler thing that I say coming from a hockey background, but that's something that I've kind of thought for a number of years now. And Reid, this is the first time anybody's asked me about it, and it's come up on this podcast.
I'm glad you could share. I think longtime listeners will know my views on secondary assist, and that is they're garbage. Mike, thanks for joining us. For those of you watching and listening, because you couldn't see this, we are just now been joined by Michael Denton, one of the other regular co-hosts of this show. Was not sure if he'd be able to make it tonight or when he'd be able to make it tonight. So Mike has joined us. Thank you much, Mike. We are talking about just the 1 or 2 things that we're hoping to see for this season, because Ben has been in touch with us and said that he doesn't have a date yet, but that the game is coming soon. So you think about that. Spencer, what are you hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intermixed with you guys. I think that, over the years, it's been interesting. The development of the switcheroo was kind of a gimme of last year, where it's easy to put some guys on the bench and like, hey, so if this guy doesn't play, and I'm going to do the strategy of playing somebody that doesn't matter at all, and then I get a ton of points on the bench. I mean, that may have helped me, but I mean, this may not be fantasy specific, but it's really tough those weeks where there's only 5 teams playing, 6 playing, and you've got this week where you've got to load up, but then you only have 3 players per team on a certain thing. So like that's a really tough week to be able to figure out what you're going to do when there's all these teams doing CONCACAF and international and everything going on. So I don't know exactly how they're going to fix that part of it going forward. We just kind of need a better schedule. But no, I mean, I kind of agree with Matt with the assist part of it. There's some times where, I mean, if you've played soccer in your life and you have a decent pass to someone, and then is able, and then that first one is a 3-point assist, that doesn't seem necessarily fair in a lot of times. But I mean, the game's getting better. They're trying their best, and yeah, I think overall, I don't really agree with it at a cap for every single week. Blayne, I totally get where you're coming from, but there is a lot of value if you're going to risk keeping Carlos Vela in your team from the get-go. And if he does rise 6 million over a set of 8-10 weeks, and you can in your roster, regardless of how much he's going to actually contribute on certain games, like then you may be able to be at that point where you load up on, you have 130 million ready to go, and you took that strategy early to give yourself some points. So I mean, I'm here and there, and we'll see. I'm just excited to see if they do change things and how you're going to adapt as a player to these new rules.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
That's part of the fun. Going to chat real quick, we have Skylar Redpath with us, who writes the weekly player rankings articles over at MLSsoccer.com. He has mentioned that he would love to see some of the VIP trips back to the prizes used to be VIP trips to All-Star games, which I'm pretty sure Skylar won his fair few trips. But he would love to see some prize expansion, which is always awesome to see. Then we've got JoJo, one of our longtime followers on the show. Was something easy like being able to look at your year totals from past years. Definitely something we lost with the provider switch over. And then Shane, another one of our longtime followers, similar to what's already been said, I'm glad it's not like La Liga Fantasy where you pick a team and have to buy and sell people. You can steal your people. I hope it never becomes that. So a few little hopes right there. And this is one of the great things about having people. If you are able to join us during our live broadcasts, we love interacting with the fans right here in the show. This makes it really fun. Mike, I was vamping for you a little bit there. Just a quick little, what are you hoping for in this season?
What I hope for is very simple. I would like the league to show me that they care about this game. Because right now, I am not convinced that they have any interest in this game whatsoever. The official league account has not tweeted since October 5th, which was the last day. It's been months since they've done so. I mean, we're 3 weeks away. And I heard you earlier, Ben can't give us an opening date. No prices have been officially revealed. Absolutely no lead up. Total missed opportunity. They just made it clear they don't care. So that's what I would want. I would want someone from the league to show they care, whether it's increase of prices, promotion. We've talked about it ad nauseum. People on here have heard me rant about it ad nauseum. They've done absolutely nothing, regardless of whatever ideas it's been. They haven't taken any of them. They've just made minor in-game changes, which they'll probably release a week before and then give us a week to try to look over prices and get a league together. It's unacceptable. It's been unacceptable for a few years now. And hopefully the league brings in someone who actually cares about the game to run the game and to promote the game.
Mike is not reserved in any of his opinions, but we appreciate it. And I know that some of you listening out there may share the same opinions of Mike. We don't know what the game is going to be at this point, so I'll just underscore that right now. I think we can agree, though, that, yeah, if there was some more advance notice, that would obviously be great. But I do hope that people will still stay around and play, and we care. We will be here to help guide you along the way. Okay, let's move into segment 2, the main reason why I hope you guys came here tonight. This is our Western Conference team preview. So it's all focused on the West, a fantasy focus on the West, may I add. Some of this may overlap with actual performance. So we were talking with Matt just a little bit ago about this. So a good team can be a good team in fantasy and in real life, but we will see what happens. So what I've got here is I've got all these guys, and I've asked them to divide the West into their top-tier teams, their mid-tier teams, and their bottom-tier teams. So when you guys do that, feel free to give some explanation. But what I want to know right now is, what was your determining factor when you were making these tiers? Just like, how did you approach defining what made a team a top versus a mid? Matt, let's just start with you. Your top right corner.
So I chose based on value. So, obviously, as we talked a little bit about, in a vacuum, Carlos Vela is probably still at least as of last year, was the best fantasy player that you had. But is he better for you on the road, in the rain at Seattle at $14.5 million or whatever? Or would you rather take Chicharito playing Nashville SC at home, for example, with the LA Galaxy getting their stuff together? So I kind of combined it in a weird mashup between, is the team actually good? Am I actually getting good value? I'm not sure that FC Dallas is going to be a playoff team this year, but I know that there will be reasonably priced young starters who will bring good value for, somewhere around that $7 to $8 million valuation based on where the numbers were roughly at, in 2019. So those types of players, those types of teams I might value more, even though I might say that LAFC in a vacuum is better. But if you want a starter, you're going to have to pay $10 million. I would rather have, somebody like Danny Acosta, being able to get him on the bench knowing that he's going to play 90 minutes rather than having to check to see whether or not Mark Anthony Kaye or Latif Blessing are starting, for the game. And if one of them's on the bench, I'm going to have to switch things around. So that is the lens upon which I view these teams for who's really good, who's in the middle, and who's bad, accounting for price valuation.
I like that. I like that really well. I mean, we can go around. This is round table style, so feel free to jump in. But does anybody disagree with that or want to add anything to it? Everybody like it? No, that was solid.
I win. Okay.
You knocked it out.
I used fantasy in 2020, folks.
That's right. That's right. Matt Pollard nailed it right there. No, exactly. I think that gets it all. It's not always about price. So much of it depends upon the matchups and that overall value that teams provide. So fantastic way of wrapping this up. So let's just jump into it. For those of you joining us right now in the video world, we're getting ready to talk about our Western Conference preview, and we're going to have our top tier teams. So Blayne, let's start with you. And then, like I said, guys, feel free to jump in if you really passionately disagree with something. If not, we'll just go around. So who are your top tier teams, Blayne?
Yeah, just piggyback right off where Matt started. These are teams that I can pretty reliably look at to grab some quality players. They may not be the best players every week, but they're the guys that I can pretty much guarantee are going to be impact players, and that's LAFC. I mean, when you've got Velo and you've got K in there, you've got two really good guys. If the defense can solidify, which there's some questions there, you've got a primary defender right there. Shout. LA Galaxy goes up there. I think there's enough big names there that are going to make an impact right away. Minnesota United on the defensive side, I think, goes up there as well. And then I'm kind of torn. I don't like to put more than a third in the top tier. So Seattle and RSL, and I think it's going to depend on what we see in preseason, who I'm going to put up at the top. Those are two teams that had good runs last year. Seattle's got the names that you can kind of expect to give you good points every week. But I think RSL is built to where they could leapfrog Seattle for that last top tier spot in my rankings, just depending on how they look in preseason and how some of the new players fit in.
Spencer, we're going to have to go to you because Blayne has mentioned Seattle and you're a fan.
Oh, for sure. So kind of going with where I put my rankings, I'm on board with all you guys. I mean, we kind of know the strategy where it comes to fantasy. You know, it's an interesting thing that I hear every season that are more fantasy points than a 5-5 tie, which is crazy to think of that. You get every defender is getting shutouts. So what I'm looking for is teams that are going to have a high probability of goals and what those players are going to be also shuts right between, like, I would see San Jose as a team that has a lot of players that have high ability to get great amount of points, but necessarily might not be that top of the table for the West. So, you know, for me, for Seattle, just to speak on them, the defense is going to be really shoddy this year. We have a lot of new guys that are going to have to intermix with each other. But looking at Leerdam last year, he's going to be one of my top defenders, which we're going to get into later. But Leerdam is a guy that is scoring goals and is going to be someone from that right side assisting, right? So for me, what I look for is wingbacks. Wingbacks can get the ability to be a Rodney Wallace back in the day. Can we get a wingback that's going to get shutouts and goals and assists? That's going to be that type of attacking player. And I think that those teams are going to be the teams that want to get forward from the back. And that would be, to me, San Jose. That's going to be. But overall, for me, like for the West, as far as like what I'm looking at off the bat is new guys that are coming in that are going to be a potential of low price right off the bat that are explode, you know. So it's going to be interesting to see some of these new forwards that are coming in from the Mexican League. Are they going to be placed at 11 million or are they going to be placed at 8 million? And at that 8 million spot with a lot of unknown, that could be a huge, huge hit, especially with the first games of the season and how money's going to play and if they're going to increase. So I'm trying to find those, you know, diamonds in the rough of guys that are going to just fit right into that groove.
No, that's good. Good way to approach it. I like where you're thinking about with defenders. Matt, let's go over to you. I saw a comment by Chris in chat who says he has a good feeling about Colorado, and you're rocking some swag right now. So who are your top tier teams?
Yeah, so I guess let's start with the Rapids. You know, if I were doing a power ranking 1 to 13 in the West, I don't know that I would put the Pids number 1 right there. But, you know, if you look at how this team and how players have individually been priced, Rapids players are usually relatively inexpensive. Other than, you know, I think there was a point where Kai Kamara had a goal in 4 league games straight. You know, you're not going to find a starter any more than $9 million. You've got a couple of really decently priced goalkeepers or defenders as well. And then, you know, I think Clint Irwin's going to be sliding a little bit under the radar compared to some of the other keepers that we're getting. So, you know, I probably have the Rapids right around that bubble team. You know, I think they'll finish no worse than 7th, but I think they could easily be top 4 as in being 3rd or 4th at the absolute best. But you're going to get some really reasonably priced players who are going to be regular starters. And there's not really any key weaknesses that you have. Maybe one thing that I didn't mention in terms of how I evaluate these teams is also having good options entirely across the field. If we take the LA Galaxy, for example, you know, their expected front 3 and in their 4-3-3 is going to be absolute dynamite, maybe a little bit pricey. I still have a lot of concerns in defense. So, you know, for example, I'd have the LA Galaxy in the middle, but even though they're more expensive, I still think LAFC is probably the best option that you have. Pick any 3 starters when they have a home game, a favorable home game, and you're probably going to be good. It's just going to cost you anywhere from 28 to 35 million to get those 3 starters in. I think Minnesota United's going to be really, really improved. Kind of concerned in the sense that I don't think they have a go-to forward, you know, is going to bang in goals like a Carlos Vela, like an Alan Pulido for Sporting Kansas City. But I mean, other than that, they're solid in the midfield. They'll be solid in defense. They'll be solid in goal. And then I think we're going to see a much improved Sporting Kansas City team this year. And that's going to correlate to just better fantasy value that you have all the way from back to the front. And then, of course, for the same reasons, I put the Rapids in there as well. I think any one of those 4 teams, LAFC, Minnesota, Sporting, Colorado, if they've got a good matchup in any given week, you've got a good chance at a defender who's going to get forward in the forms of a fullback, a center back who could get a bunch of bonuses, and then obviously a go-to forward, whoever's starting up top, who's going to bang in goals, who's going to be your person to play up top.
I hope everyone enjoyed that sneeze in YouTube land. I think I muted it just in time, but sorry about that. Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's pretty much nailed it. As far as who the top teams are, we haven't mentioned Portland yet, which is interesting. I mean, they'll still have Valeri, but they do kind of seem like they've kind of gone back to the middle of the pack, especially now that Brian Fernandez is gone with all of his problems. There's not really a whole lot of other teams that you can get in there. I think RSL is kind of middle of the pack too. But I think the real big feature of the West is you have some really bad teams that didn't really do much. Vancouver did absolutely nothing and may just be losing the players we have. Like I think Yordi Reyna is considered, maybe he's going to go or not. Houston Dynamo haven't brought anyone in. Lots of questions of whether they're going to sell Elise or Manotas. No, I think it was Manotas. It was either Elise or Manotas who just got his green card. Can't remember which one of them off the top of my head.
Manotas is there. Kyoto went to Montreal.
I know Kyoto's gone. Montreal's got its own problems. We'll talk about them next week.
Yeah.
Next week. They've got Quintero now, though. Ththey've got Quintero. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they lost Piatti, so they're pretty much trash.
I meant Houston.
All right.
We all lost Piatti, Mike. We all lost Piatti.
That's next week.
But yeah, I mean, I think, but I think one of the interesting things about the West, maybe a little bit different from the East, is a lot of the teams that we look at do have big questions. Seattle lost a lot of their big contributors in the back line. I know Spencer's confident, but that how they rebuild it will be, they did spend big money. So we'll see how these new additions come in. But, a lot of these guys aren't people we've heard of, so we have to see how they do in the league. A lot of the teams stood pat, like LAFC, but now they have injuries. They're really interesting in that they brought in BWP. That's probably one of the biggest picks for the early season, especially with Diomande looking like he's going to miss some time. But LA Galaxy, their backline is still really bad. So I don't know why they didn't bring him. So there's a lot of big question marks around the top teams in the West. Either they kind of stood pat and maybe they shouldn't have, or they brought in people who we just don't know about. But I think there is pretty clear delineations there, with Colorado really the only team I see rising out of the non-playoffs into the playoffs.
Yeah, and Colorado did some great stuff to help shore up last year as well, especially on their defense, keeping Abubakar and everybody there. So that was really good for them. The last bit that I'll add, well, two things. One, I'm going to touch back to something Spencer said about bringing in some of the younger Mexican talent. I think that's been a great addition that we've seen several of these teams be able to go down to Liga MX and get some guys, some kids that are really loaded with potential. So I'm excited to see a lot of that in the league this year. For me, the last element that I'll add for helping me determine who a top tier team is just very simple. It's we know last year we had a limit of 3 players per team. So it's who would I be willing to pick 3 players from? That's basically for me what made a top team. And Matt just has such a great point. That's why my LA Galaxy pick is not a top tier team, because some of those players are so expensive that even while they may be well worth having 3 players in your team, it's going to be such a huge hit that maybe at the beginning of the season, it's not going to be as viable. So for me, LAFC, Minnesota, and Sporting Kansas City, I like what you guys have done down there, Blayne. These teams look like they have players in not just 3 players, but players across the board in multiple positions, where I could go with a defender, a midfielder, or a forward and have coverage throughout my whole team, or even just go back to a keeper at times, depending on who's there. Though unfortunately, Zach McMath, I think Matt Doyle described him as the journeyman keeper of MLS. I think he's trying to go to every team before he retires. I don't know if he'll ever be in my team, but did not make the top tier. But that's for me. Those 3 teams: LAFC, Minnesota, Sporting Kansas City. I think they have some good value, and I could easily see myself going with 3 players from their team. Any other final comments for top tier before we move on to mid? Disagreements? Anything like that?
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
So I would say don't sleep on Houston, guys. So Tab Ramos coming in as head coach. He's been pretty successful with the youth, and he's got something to prove coming into the MLS. And I think that we're kind of sleeping on Darwin Quintero coming into Houston. So we'll get to it later, but Elise actually number 4 last year in the West for assists per 90 minutes. He had 10 assists, so almost an assist every other game, and that's Albert Elise. And then you add in Darwin Quintero into that mix of, that kind of offensive power. Yeah, Quintero, or he went to Montreal, but I think that's a huge upgrade with Darwin Quintero, who got basically snubbed and left out of Minnesota at the end of the year. So you got a lot of guys down there in Houston with something to prove. Should be interesting to see what goes down there in the Heat this year.
My only thing with Houston is I want to see more out of their defense, and I think you're right. Those are some great picks to put up there. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, let me see more of Memo. Like I love seeing Memo playing last year, and he had some great value for point production.
Yeah,
in fantasy.
Reid, go to mid tier.
Go to mid tier.
I was
okay.
Gonna fire
okay.
Up.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna break into mid tier right now, and I'm going to start it. Houston is in my mid tier team. 59 goals conceded last year, and 59 goals against last year, and a goal differential of -10. So they did okay, but 59 is just too much. That makes me worrisome on defense. And so again, like with my top tier teams, I was looking at teams with 2 solid players that I would go to and think, okay, yeah, I could probably pick one of these guys. For Houston, it's definitely focused on the front for me. I could see me going with the 2 Houston front line and Memo Rodriguez and some of those guys there in midfield. But I've got the Galaxy right here. That's probably all I could afford from that team. And they would probably be Pavone and Chicharito. But I got LA Galaxy right there. Dallas, Houston, Portland for me. RSL sneaks in here. San Jose, Colorado, and then Seattle. Those are all teams that, to me, fall into the mid-tier. Again, I could easily see myself picking up 2 players from these teams. 3 in the right situation or the right budget, but I'd start to have some questions right there, depending on how form plays out. So quick one there. Blayne, you had some opinions. I'm going to have to throw it to you.
Yeah, because I love the discussion about Houston. I throw Portland in here as well. Colorado's another one. Possibly San Jose, depending on how you feel about them. Either the other of RSL or Seattle, whichever one you don't bounce up to the top tier. But these are all teams where I see 1 or 2 players that you expect everything to kind of go through. These have got a highlight player that you can pick, but I don't trust the team as much. These are teams that gave up a lot of goals. I know Portland's defense was giving up some late goals last year and just wasn't quite what we expected them to be. These are teams that have got huge question marks around them, league or for just in general league play, but it's also fantasy. Like Portland suffers from the Valeri versus Blanco issue. Which one do you take? And that's not going to change this year. I don't think you're going to be able to invest in both of them all the time because I don't trust Portland enough to take both of them in the same game and use up 2 midfield slots. But now I've got to make the decision, which one do I take this week? And I hate those decisions. And so that solidly puts them in a mid-tier. Houston's also here because while I really hope Quintero can come out and do something, he was benched in Minnesota, and they weren't the strongest attacking team last year. There's a huge question mark around him and what he's going to do. Memo is somebody we all want to see more of. He's always been cheaper and pretty electric when he's out there. I would love to see more Memo, but we're stuck with, we've got Manotas. Quintero's got a pretty good sized contract again. What do you do with all these pieces? And I think there's some real risk for rotation here or just picking the wrong guy. And these are teams that I don't trust. Like, they're all playoff bubble teams. I don't trust them week in and week out to get the job done. Unlike my top tier teams, I expect good results from them, home or away. I mean, a good showing away, even if they don't win. These are guys that you can kind of rely on. And the mid-tier teams are not guys that I'm going to be looking to rely on all the time. They're going to be if the opportune matchup comes up or if I've got the extra budget to fit one of these guys in.
Very good. Mike.
I think I generally agree with that. I think one of the interesting cases is San Jose. It really depends on whether you feel like what you're going to get from San Jose is the first half of the year or the second half of the year.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like going off the gate, I think they'll probably be strong. They'll have the energy. I think we'll see more of what we saw kind of mid-year from them when they were really, really good. And I think they'll be underpriced. So I think if you're looking at a mid-tier team, I definitely wouldn't pick 3 of their players, but I think you're going to get some value out of that just because they're going to be overproducing in the beginning of the year as opposed to the rest of the year. The only other comment I would just kind of say is this is very fluctuating kind of category. Like, for example, we talked in the beginning about LAFC and Seattle as first-tier teams. And for most of the year, that's probably right. But for the first month, LAFC and Seattle are probably low bottom-tier teams because of CCL and all the rotation that happens. So sometimes you can get some cheap value from them, from random guys starting who shouldn't otherwise. But sometimes you can get some good value from teams who are playing them who just get, B or C teams while the A team is flying down to Mexico. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind if we have some new listeners, new players to fantasy who are just trying to figure out about the league. That's really, really important in month 1.
Yeah, no, great point. And even though the game is not out, I do have a draft, my prediction of what the fantasy schedule is going to look like based upon the team rosters or team schedules that have been published over at MLSFantasyBoss.com. You can check out that first draft of the schedule. Matt.
So I've got kind of 2 groups of the 5 teams that I'm looking at as far as my middle tier. I'll start with the group of 3, FC Dallas, San Jose Earthquakes, and Real Salt Lake. Kind of similar to you, Reid, I'm looking at it. Are there 2 players on, a good week for any of these 3 teams that I'm looking at? I don't know that there's anybody stand out in the same way that, I look at, say a Portland Timbers. And obviously if I'm going with Portland, it's going to be Valeri and Blanco or one of the combination of those, maybe an Abobasi or one of the Charas. I don't know that there's a standout. I'm dropping 10 million on anybody individually from these 3 teams with the exception of maybe Albert Rusnak. But if RSL's got a home game against Orlando, for example, I'll have Rusnak. Maybe I'll look at one of the midfielders and then see what my cheap options are as far as a backline player to maybe stash on the bench and hope for a switcheroo with a clean sheet or something like that. And then the other 2, which I would say are a little bit more top heavy, would be Seattle and the LA Galaxy, whereas there's obviously going to be 2 players who I'm looking at any given week, whereas Dallas, it could be, any one of 5 or 6 players. If I'm going with the LA Galaxy, it's going to be a home game against Nashville, and it's probably going to be Pavone and Chicharito, maybe in a good week, or if they have a DGW, I'm looking at a Sebastian Lletget or a Joe Corona, or I'm curious to see with the pricing where Jonathan Dos Santos goes, just because a lot of his points last year weren't so much goals and assists so much as bonuses. And are those point values changing? And as a guy who's consistent like that, but only getting me, his peak out is at like 8 points, is that going to be worth dropping 10 million on any given week? And I think Seattle, I still have a lot of concerns about what they're going to do at center back, but I mean, pick any one of the front fives. Lodero's a lock for any home game they have. I'd say the same thing for Reid if he's healthy, but I mean, after that, pick your poison between Gustav Svensson, Kelvin Leerdam, Christian Roldan, Jordan Morris, just based on pricing and who ends up starting. But those would be my 5 middle tier, albeit a group of 2 and a group of 3 that I am approaching very differently, even though I think they're middle of the pack.
Yeah, no, great. Let's see, I think we touched, did we get to you yet, Spencer?
No, I mean, you guys pretty much said everything I was going to say. The big thing that I'm looking at for those mid-tier teams is honestly just schedule. So, like what you guys iterated with the CONCACAF Champions League, yes, LAFC to be wearing with Toronto at home. They got Minnesota at home, and then they go to Philly, and then they've got Kansas City at home, right? So when I'm looking at schedule for most of these mid-tier teams, I'm picking maybe against these teams in the last season or so. I mean, but it's tough, guys. I mean, it's a huge question mark for Kansas City. Huge question mark because there was an injury horrible season last year.
It was.
Is Beasler and Zusi still going to have that type of DP level in the back to be able to ensure that Milia is not going to have to make a ton of saves and PK saves all year long, or at least the season to start, So, yeah, I mean, for me with these mid, it's kind of going to be picking the diamond in the rough and figuring out who's going to do well with the schedule to start it off.
So I'll let you talk real quick, Blayne. You feeling good about your boys?
I'm very optimistic, but if you've noticed, is all this talk, there's been one team that hasn't been mentioned yet by me, and we've got one section left on the tier list.
Well, I'm not going to let you go first this time because you went first after
good.
me last time. All right, we'll just go right into it. The bottom tier teams. And Mike, you are our Debbie Downer, so we'll let you talk about all these teams that people should be down upon as bottom tier fantasy teams from the West.
All right, so I actually think Sporting Kansas City is in this category. I'm sure Blayne is going to jump up and yell, but I'm just being Debbie Downer on everyone, so I'll just dump on his team. I know they signed a big number 9. I'm sure he'll get it. I don't know who's getting him service. I don't think they did nearly enough to improve the team. The fact that they're still looking at Beasler and Zusi as starters to me is a little weak. They needed to really revamp. They're just too old, and they're setting themselves up for more injuries. So I could see Sporting Kansas City kind of coming out strong, and then once the minutes on those legs start wearing, them kind of breaking down and falling apart like they've done a lot of time. But I mean, the true bottom of the barrel, the worst team I think in the West is going to be Vancouver, not Nashville. I'm going to go with Vancouver. They've done absolutely nothing. They've taken all their money that they got from Bayern Munich, and I don't know what they did with it. Maybe they just took it on nice little sails and cruise around the Pacific Northwest, which I don't know. I'm sure Spencer enjoys that, but I don't know why they haven't invested more, why they haven't brought in big names. They're just going to be terrible. There's just something bad about that. Now for Nashville, I actually kind of liked what they did. Dax McCarty, Hannibal Godoy, like they're not going to be good. They're not going to make the playoffs, but like they were kind of struck me as like they won't be FC Cincinnati bad. But
I mean, who can be?
Well, I mean, Minnesota the year before was kind of FC Cincinnati bad for much.
Who's got the record for most goals conceded, huh? Who's got the record for the largest negative goal differential? Huh?
That's a weird thing to be proud of, Reid, but okay.
I'm not gonna stop you. We've got a lot to be proud of this year.
But then this whole thing about the stadium, that's just a really big off the field distraction issue, because you don't get any of the benefits from being an expansion. You don't get any of the benefits from the excitement when everyone is questioning whether or not your club should close down, and your franchise is literally sending letters to the mayor saying they're going to yank our franchise if you don't give us a stadium in a week. So assuming that they actually do kick off a ball, which I have no idea what's actually going to happen with that. I don't think you get the same boost from expansion. I think that's a big distraction because players are wondering if they're going to be looking for new jobs next year already. Combine that with the normal expansion pangs. This is not an Atlanta or LAFC where they dropped big amounts of cash. This is definitely going to be a team to target.
I mean, they'll just get bought by Precor down in Austin. That's how that'll work. But no, for serious though, if they need to get that stadium up in a week, they need to talk to the people who build the dollar stores around here because they put those things up fast. They do, just so quick. Blayne, your response to that, since Sporting Kansas City had some shots fired over the bow.
Oh, I was going to say bottom tier, Sporting Vancouver, Nashville, right here. San Jose I throw down here. Sporting being the lone, Sporting being kind of the one that I don't lump in with the other three as much. I think they've got a lot of high-powered players. I don't think it's as dire as Mike makes it out to be. I do worry a lot about Zusi. I'm not thrilled about seeing him start more this season. I think we do need somebody younger and faster. He needs to move back to midfield, which is too crowded. But this is going to be a rotation-heavy team. There's a lot of positions to battle for. I think really the only three guys that are locks to start in the attacking core are going to be Pulido, Johnny Russell, and Felipe Gutierrez. I think everybody else is a steady rotation risk or a 60-minute and out risk. And even Pulido and Russell could be that 60-minute and out risk. And that's why I put them bottom tier. Until we see stuff go on that makes me solidify the roster a little bit when I see that come together. I mean, they grabbed an Israeli midfielder who is a direct competition for Roger Espinoza, but Espinoza always seems to fight his way into the lineup. Or that means Ilie Sanchez gets sacrificed to pit both of them in. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot in flux with this team, but coming off of a record-setting goals conceded year, it doesn't look good. The other three teams, I know Vancouver grabbed Lucas Cavallini. I think that helps the attack, but if he's not getting the service he needs, he's not going to do enough. I honestly I'm not too upset with the look of both San Jose and Nashville. I think they both got some pretty solid defenses. The San Jose man marking gave teams fits last year, and I like the veteran leadership that Nashville's brought in. They've got an experienced goalkeeper. They've got a lot of experienced defenders. Some Dax and Godoy are going to be able to shield that defense. And I look at the offense that they've got there. It looks like a bunker and counter team a little bit, which may be ugly, but they've got a lot of speed going forward in that team if they want to drop back a little bit. I think they could play spoiler in the West and pick off teams here and there, but I don't think that's beneficial for fantasy, so that's why they end up down here. Maybe one or two of those guys get really hot and their defense or the defensive midfielders in a traditional double game week setting where we score both games. You've got some solid options on these teams, but when you're looking at your best options for teams being defenders, they have to go bottom tier.
I just think you guys are absolutely nuts to put Sporting Kansas. Well, I think you're nuts to put Sporting Kansas City this low too. I think you're absolutely nuts to put San Jose this low in the rankings. I mean, looking at Vela and Lima and Youngworth and Vaco and Wando, like you've got guys who, while they weren't the greatest producers last year, a bit of spurts here and there, they were easy on the budget. They had great form, and I don't think that the man mark system is going to be completely solved this season. That will still continue to give people fits, and it will still result in some points for San Jose. If nothing else, I feel like Vega, I don't know what his price is going to be, but I feel like Vega won't be priced in that $6 million range. It'll be pretty affordable and could be an easy keeper to fall back onto that gives you, for me, a reason to think, well, I could probably grab two San Jose guys and not really think too much about it. But I just think that's undeserved. Spencer, your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I have Nashville in my bottom only because it's the unknown. It's an expansion team. Like, Mike said, there's a bunch of, drama going on with the stadium and what's going on with the team. Is it going to be kind of awkward with the fan base? Like, not to rag on Cincinnati, but Cincinnati had an amazing fan base, and then it just didn't kind of work out on the field, right? So we're going to see what that is. It going to be a fortress? So is it going to be a good home team to pick? So Baji has scored everywhere he's been on crappy teams, on crappy seasons. He finds a way to put the ball in the back of the net. I think he's like a younger, Kai Kamara in a way, where you just put him on the field, he'll figure out a way to put it. And then, last year, Inbom was a great kind of like mid-season, getting kind of in form, and he just lifted himself up, especially at home. So he's going to be kind of one of those sneaker picks that's going to be at a low price that will give you assists and possibly goals, from Vancouver. But yeah, I mean, with the bottom teams, like kind of how I picked with Cincinnati last year is who's going to have a big game. Is it going to be home or away? Those type of things, but I'm going to stay away from Nashville until I see the product on the field and who's actually going to perform. So maybe about like 3 or 4 until I start picking up Nashville players.
Yeah, no, so fair. For me, I definitely have Vancouver down here. I think people have made some good points about Vancouver. I don't know if I'd say they've been completely quiet, maybe not as much as you would hope for a team that struggled a lot last year. Cavallini is, I think, the big X factor, but I agree with what Matt Doyle put out in his article today, that the big question for Vancouver comes down to, can they provide the service needed to take advantage of Cavallini's skill? And so if they can do that, perhaps they have a shot at becoming a mid-tier team. They do have some midfield options that might be appealing there, but lots of question marks there. And I also have Nashville down here as my bottom 2 for a lot of the same reasons you guys said. Spencer, they're an unknown, and I think that is something to really weigh heavily. We have seen the history of expansion teams is more likely a history of struggle than it is of success. We have examples of that not happening, but the expansion teams tend to struggle more than they do succeed immediately, so I think they will be worth betting against. But I have to agree, again, when Doyle's article came out, which if you all have not read Matt Doyle's latest article where he gets into some of the breakdowns of depth and potential team rosters, when I sat there and looked at Nashville's roster, it was the first time I really got a good look at the current roster. I too had been caught up in all the drama going around with the stadium and everything, and I looked at those players and I thought, it's not that bad really. So I could see, like Mike was saying, them being a bit of maybe a spoiler team for the West, but I don't know if that will result in a lot of fantasy points, especially if they try to become a team, kind of like FC Cincinnati was trying to be last year, of this very defensive bunker counterattack, maybe getting 1 goal. But I was more impressed with Nashville's makeup than I thought I would be. So kudos.
I feel like
guys.
Nashville's GM probably plays fantasy because he's got Ladraga, he's got he's got like Godoy, like all these like weird
I love
Dave
that.
Romney, $4 million as a starter. That's a pretty good shout.
That's right. He was all right, guys. We have $100 million to make this team work. Let's do it. We're getting David and Tom. Fail. All right, Matt, take us home. Who are your bottom tier teams?
Yeah, I've got Vancouver and Nashville here, bottom and second bottom. Everybody else has beaten those 2 horses to death, so I won't spend any more time on those. And the other 2 that I have on here are Portland and Houston. Kind of similar to your points, Reid, about how, the top tier is, do I want 3 players from them? The middle tier is, do I want 2 players from them? But I mean, Portland still hasn't really addressed any of their issues defensively. There's a bunch of reasons, unless they change the rules, why having a D-mid isn't necessarily a good value pickup as a midfielder and MLS Fantasy, which has me concerned about both of the Chara brothers. And I mean, Diego Valeri's fantastic. I'm glad that he was able to stay and work things out with Portland, but Father Time is still undefeated. And I'm just wondering at what point are we going to see a crash from him in the same way that we saw from BWP last year with the New York Red Bulls. And so if it's, if they have a bad matchup or Valeri's not able to stay healthy, is it worth it to spend $10 million on Sebastian Blanco or $8 million on an Abobasi for when the rest of the team I don't have a whole lot of confidence in. And then my main issues with Houston is I would follow up that I would have this state I have Houston in my bottom tier under the condition that I would love to have a media opportunity to ask Todd Ramos several questions in detail, what the plans are for Darwin Quintero and how he fits in with the rest of the system. And then the other big concern that I have, I'm viewing this on the whole of the entire season. So a lot of, is this team going to be competitive throughout the year? Is CCL going to affect some of the teams and players who are in CCL? Yeah. Are they going to be in the playoff hunt to where August, September, and October are going to matter for them? And I'm just really concerned that one of Manotas or Elise gets sold in the summer. And if that happens and Quintero is kind of in a weird position and the defense isn't improved that much, even with Pablo Mastroeni being on Tab's staff, that's just where I have a lot of concerns around Houston Dynamo, where there might be one player at any given time who I'm willing to look at, but there's not a lot of options in the midfield. There's definitely not of options in defense. And if one of their two big players who I just mentioned gets sold in the summer, I don't see a lot of anything from a fantasy standpoint other than bench switcheroo options for the second half of the year. And so that's why I have Houston there. And similarly, if anything happens to Valeri, I'd say the same thing of Portland.
Very fair. I'm Team Blanco.
Matt brought up something I just want to comment on, which is about depth. And I don't think we've talked about one thing about the top tier teams, about LAFC and Seattle. One thing we did see last year is that both of those teams struggled when their depth was challenged. Whenever LAFC got a bunch of injuries, and we had periods of Seattle where, it was like, who is that on their team? Like, they were putting out C teams, and I think poor Ashley had to come on here and was like, just please pick against Seattle, because and so that's going to be a real challenge for both those teams playing in CCL, because then you're going to have more compression and they're going to be forced to play more international dates. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. We'll see what MLS does, because MLS changes schedule on the flies because MLS. But I think that's something to kind of keep in mind, and that could really knock those teams down into a mid-tier, maybe even a bottom tier, if they get a rash of injuries, because we've seen it happen. We saw it happen to Sporting Kansas City last year.
Okay, last question before we get on to our top 5 players. Blayne threw this one out, so Blayne, I'll let you lead this little part here.
Yeah, one of the big questions that always comes up at this time of the year is, how do you target defenses early? So what are the 3 teams you're looking at early for defensive success? You might throw out if you've looked at the schedule pretty close or not. I know I haven't, so my teams are coming from that one. And then who are you going to be betting against early? Like, which defenses are you going to hedge against and think their opponents are going to score? Which ones do you think are going to have the early success?
You didn't have to say somebody's name. That's how it makes it work.
Oh, Spencer, let's start with you, because I know Seattle's had some defensive changes.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, don't bet on Seattle, guys, unless you're going to take Leardom, because we're going to throw him forward. He's going to go nuts, and he's going to probably score some goals. He's got some freedom. We've got 2 center backs that have never played with each other before. Kim season. So do not bet on Seattle. It's probably going to be Nuhu on the left, and that choo-choo train, you never know what's going to happen. I would be so happy if he's just going to be banging in assists and goals this year, but it's probably happen on Minnesota. They're keeping most of their guys. They're going to Tyler Miller coming in at keeper is not even, to me, that much of a downgrade from Menote, from Vino. And you got Iko Park, the reigning defensive player of the year. So I'm putting my chips in on Minnesota, especially with their schedule coming in on the earlier part of the year. Let's see, they have away at Portland, they're away at San Jose, but then they're home Red Bull, home Montreal. I think that's the thing is, to me, when I'm looking at defensive, I'm going, how'd you finish last year? How'd you do last year? Did you keep your guys? Is there going to be a lot of stuff? So stay away from Seattle. I would say stay away from Portland, for obvious reasons. And then, keep with Minnesota, and maybe I know. Maybe even a little bit of RSL. It might be interesting to see how they're going to revamp with Nick Raimondo going gone too.
Zach McMath, man. Zach McMath. I'll throw something in there for you, Blayne. I also think that I do have the schedule open right now, MLSFantasyBoss.com. I do have the schedule open right here, and I do agree that I think Minnesota has a pretty good start to the season. Portland, San Jose away is not the roughest teams to start with, especially at the beginning of the season when people are still looking for form. Some questions about Portland, San Jose, if they do come out still very defensively, kind of get back in that run. And then the 2 run home games before the bye week. They actually have 4 home games in a row that are split in half by a bye week. So that's a pretty massive run for Minnesota right there. So they could be a very good defense to look at for a while in the very beginning of the season. I also like LAFC with their home run. They have 3 home games in the first 4 weeks, with the third week being a bye, so they have a little bit of break there before another bye. So they got some byes before they have to travel any. It's Miami at home though, so that's going to be an interesting game to open up, followed by Philadelphia, which was really rolling last year. So those could be harder games, but having that home form and some of those players, even though they have a little bit of different look in the back, like their keeper, so we'll get to that in a second. But I think LAFC has a good shot at having a pretty decent defense early in the season. I'm just going to give you 2 since you gave me 2 answers when I asked you for 1. I'm just giving you 2 when you asked for 3.
Okay, that's fine. Matt or Mike?
Sure, I can jump in here. Teams that are conditioned to altitude are doing so for about 3 weeks, and most teams are figuring things out. So RSL and Colorado are pretty decent shots, and given the way the winter's gone in the Rocky Mountains, I'd put pretty good money on at least one of those teams having a Snow Classico, or at least a very, very chilly home game in their first 2 home games as well. So I'd favor them. I think Minnesota's probably a good shout, but I wouldn't be surprised if Matias Almeida, just with some iterative learning in San Jose, tries to change things up for the whole of the season. But in the beginning of the year, probably figuring everybody else is getting fit, everybody's figuring out their lineup. Let's just be really, really fit in preseason, and then just man mark and counterattack the heck out of other people. And I think that was something that was really, really effective, like other teams didn't necessarily know how to deal with. So that would probably be my other 3 teams. So give me the Rocky Mountains, and then give me the Rocky Mountain Cup teams, and then the San Jose Earthquakes, to just be able to outfit opponents, especially at home, and then just be able to outwork them.
So the team I'll throw out to start is FC Dallas. I'm not interested in the first few weeks in LAFC or Seattle until I know that they're out of CCL. I just don't touch them because I don't know which team is going to show up. Dallas doesn't have that problem. They start off with 2 home games, one against Philadelphia, who just lost Majudanin. So I think that's going to be a pretty big loss for them, even though they still have Montero. The other thing about Dallas's defense is that they have some, depending on what the price is, they have some really good players, Cannon, Ziegler. And I think if you start off with them, usually what we see with pricing in the past, we'll have to see how Ben does it this year, is that there's kind of a cap. And a lot of those Dallas players were the ones who were the highest priced defenders towards the end of the year, especially Cannon, because of how involved they were on the offense. This might be a good time to kind of get in on those Dallas players if they can get some clean sheets with 2 home games, and then their third game is on the road against NYCFC, who may be involved in CCL as well. I don't remember who their second game is, but it wasn't too bad either. So I think they're a pretty good option to look at.
Yeah, and I just throw out, I had San Jose and Colorado up there with Minnesota for my 3. I think Matt hit them really hard on why I like both San Jose and Colorado. I think they've got players and systems that are going to be beneficial and really give early season teams a lot of fits. And then Minnesota should just come right back into form where they were.
All right, well, thanks for that, Blayne. Let's move on now to segment 3, final segment for tonight, and this is going to be top players to target from the West. So we're going to do the top 5 players from each position, starting with keepers. Matt, let's go with you.
So starting with keepers, I think number 1, albeit as a guy who's new to MLS, but is probably coming into one of the best defensive teams. I'm curious to see where he'll start off his price, but give me Kenneth Vermeer. And then the next 3 that I have are all solid keepers in their own right and are okay defensively. Tyler Miller coming into Minnesota, I think is going to be reasonably priced where relevant relative to other Western Conference goalkeepers. Tim Mealy, I think, is going to be a good shout on an improved and healthier Sporting Kansas City. I think in a vacuum he'll be fine, but I might not play him early on in the season because of the center back situation. Stefan Fry, and then I think that's kind of like my top 4 tier, and I don't know that there's anybody who's an obvious 5th person who's sitting at the table, so I'll just throw in Clint Irwin. I don't know that he'll be better than any of those 4 keepers above him, but he's going to have a really, really good back line with him, and he stepped up really well when Tim Howard wasn't able to play last year.
Yeah, no, fair. I thought this was actually a little bit tough to get 5 players. Mike, what about you?
I think Irwin is where I would start. I don't really have anything more to say. I mean, because it's to me, the only thing that I care about for the keeper is price.
Mm-hmm.
So without that, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I know Fry will be
fair.
good and that, but
Really
you know,
worth it.
otherwise, I really think Irwin is probably going to be the best one because he's probably going to be the cheapest of the good guys. So at least to start.
Blayne.
Yeah, I've got Irwin Miller and Vega this year. I think they've got some of the better defenses in front of them. A guy like Fry and Melia could crack the top 5 if you're looking at kind of poor defenses around them. I don't know what Seattle's going to do, and Kansas City was giving up shots last year. They could get their save numbers up pretty quick, and both those guys are pretty proficient penalty stoppers too, which can help if you just want to chase some extra points. But yeah, so those are my 5.
Spencer.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, it's hard to be able to figure out exactly what's going to roll out. I kind of like Vermeer, LAFC, like you said, with having a few home games right off the bat. You know, maybe they're going to be rotating a little bit with CCL, so we'll see how that goes. I'm hoping that Vega will be cheaper because I think that that's actually going to be a great pick if he's under that $6 million. Stefan Fry, I agree with you guys. Stefan Fry is always consistent, but is the price going to be right? So yeah, we'll just kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah, for myself, I don't have. I guess I have one difference from on here. I have Tyler Miller, I have Vermeer, I have Vega, I have Irwin, hoping there'll be some value right there. I also have Jesse Gonzalez on this list. I like the way Dallas is looking in the back. They got some solid guys. I think they had a little bit of a rough time last year, but they have some people coming back. I like the pieces that are there, and I think Jesse Gonzalez has a good shot at being a top keeper option. Again, of course, the ever-present caveat of price and form that are with us all. Moving on to defenders, Blayne, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, this one's really price dependent, and I don't know where I'm going with this one. Probably going to look at Minnesota and Colorado early. I think the Colorado guys are going to come in at a pretty good price. Leardham's also on that list. I think he's got a lot. He offers a lot going forward. And then just to give you another name, we'll throw Martins from Kansas City out there playing left back. He was getting forward a lot last year, and I think he's going to have a lot of work thrown his way.
For those of you watching, we've just had a little switch out.
I'm just saying hi.
Spencer, Ashley has held up the board, and Spencer's number is on it.
Yeah.
And she's come in to join for us just in time to talk about at least her defender picks.
So, Reid, is this a substitution, or would this be a literal MLS Fantasy switcheroo?
I think this has to be a literal MLS Fantasy switcheroo. It definitely has to be, yes.
Our first one of the season.
There we go. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't hear you guys. I just wanted to say hi. Sorry about my sub, and I agree with 50% of the things he said.
50%. Got it. If anything he said was wrong, it was not.
It was him. Everything that was right was probably my idea.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Just kidding. Thanks, you guys. See you soon.
No problem. That seems like, I think we were just testing a concussion sub right there. So it was there was an injury. Yeah, Spencer had to go off the field. We had a temporary sub that came in. He's gone through the protocols. He's okay. He's back. So we're all good. Spencer, who do you like defenders?
So I am probably on the same board of all you guys. I think that what I would just add is interesting things. Adnan, I'm really putting a question mark from Vancouver. He's had some flashes last year and seemed like he could really break through, but is he going to? Is he going to figure that out? And I think my other question mark, and sorry for being a homer, is really interested to see what Andrade is going to bring us at Seattle. So new center back, he is a Spanish speaker, so that might help with the pairing. And he's 6'2", 200, and described as crazy athletic. So that means they're trying to replace that Chad Marshall with, headers won and possible goals from headers. So that could be really interesting because that kind of fits in with what our theme is. We'll see how it goes. But, yeah, overall, I think that Iko Para may be too expensive, but he's going to get a lot of points. Hollingshead, if he continues over last year with his assists and goals, I think rolling those out would be my defenders that I'm going to be looking at to see how they do right off the bat.
Matt.
So this, and I'll say this, the same thing for the midfielders and the forwards. It's really hard for me to make these rankings given the prices. So I'm just simply picking good players who I know are going to start, who are likely to get you a lot of points. And I reserve the right to change all of these depending on what price valuation goes out. So I'll start with the last year's MLS Defender of the Year, who I think is going to be the best defender individually for his team, in Iko Para. I'd throw in Eddie Segura as well for LAFC, but I think you could look at a couple of players there. I know, Blayne, you said the Colorado guys, there's going to be a couple really good options. Sam Vines and Keegan Rosenberry are probably not going to be super expensive, but I'm going with Lalas Abubakar because I think he's the best shout to be an out-and-out starter every single game at center back. He's going to be paired up against the main forward for opposing teams, so he's going to get lots of interceptions, clearance bonuses as well. But I think as long as they're reasonably priced, you couldn't go wrong with any of those main starters. A little uncertainty right now in terms of who's going to be the starting center back next to Abubakar between Austin Trusty and Drew Moore. TBD on whether or not Court Ford is going to be healthy to start the season. And then I think from there, I'd probably go Justin Glad, just because I think he's going to be reasonably priced for RSL and probably be their most impactful defender, especially with uncertainty as far as the goalkeeper position. And then I reserve the right to say one of the Sporting Kansas City defenders is going to be really, really good and reasonably priced. I'm not sure who that is yet, but there's going to be at least one SKC player who's regularly going to be in my back line. That might rotate throughout the year, but I think Sporting Kansas City is going to be a better defensive team this year. So generally, that is just a team I'm going to look at for defenders, even though I'm not sure yet who that player is going to be or if that player is going to change throughout the year.
Fair. All right, Mike.
Whoever the cheapest defender is that I can slot in so I can spend more money up front.
a very fantasy answer right there. For me to round it all off, I agree. Iko Para, I think, is definitely going to be a top defender right there. I also think Metaner is going to be another one to keep an eye on. He was the great offensive defender that they had, getting those good points for Minnesota. So that's going to be, I think, a tough choice for a lot of people if they want to go that defensive side or that offensive side. I like Dallas again right here. Matt Hedges gets a spot for me, but could easily be Hollingshead. I really loved just the versatility of Hollingshead last year as well. Former Dallas guy, Walker Zimmerman, but Mike, you're right. Segura, another great pick from LAFC, but Zimmerman's a guy that I like a lot as well. And then I, too, have Lalas Abubakar because I really liked what I saw from him at Columbus. I liked what I saw when he went over to Colorado, and I think they've done really well with keeping that unit together in Colorado. So I'm looking forward. I'm hoping for a Colorado from a few years ago that's just a defensive powerhouse at home and just all those good fantasy points given to me right there. Midfielders, Mike, we traditionally start with you with this, so we'll do it right now.
Well, I think one of the big questions for midfielders of the West is Ladero's injury. I don't know if Spencer's, if we've addressed that. I know he had kind of picked up an injury. They're not really sure where he is. So that'll be a big question hanging over the Western midfielders. Other than that, obviously Pavone from LA Galaxy, I think will be huge. Him linking up with Chicharito. Even though I don't think Chicharito would be as prolific as Zlatan, I still think that'll be good for goals. Also they picked up Alexander Katai. We haven't mentioned his name. We know he's pretty good from Chicago Fire. He'll be a little bit underpriced, I think. So he might be a cheap way to get into the LA Galaxy.
Good call.
Do we know if he's going to be listed as a forward, though?
I do not.
I don't. I'm just gonna go off of the fact. What I'm gonna hope is that Ben Bear is looking at Matt Doyle's format and saying, "Oh, he's a winger. He's a midfielder." So if he's a forward, then. But you know what? I need a midfielder, so he's a midfielder right now
for this purpose.
And then other than that, kind of another, whether he's a midfielder or forward, talking about Colorado, Jonathan Lewis, very explosive player, can be good for a lot of goals. He can go off in spurts, but when he's hot, he's hot. But I don't know if better list him as a forward or midfielder. He's kind of played around with both of them. And then I'm trying to figure out who the last one on my list is. But Quintero, if he's listed as a midfielder or forward, depending on, I was assuming he's going to kind of move more towards the midfield with Manotas and Kyoto up top. But I guess we'll see. So those are so there's a lot of, we have to see of who gets listed as a forward or midfielder, but there's a lot of good choices here.
Spencer, who do you like?
So for me, I think that the price is going to be good to start, and a great player to get early and the points will go up would be Pavone from LA Galaxy. Last year, he had 8 assists, but he had almost an assist every game coming in at the end of the season. And that, to me, would probably pair up a little bit better with Chicharito. Zlatan is that thing where I know we're talking about midfielders, but Zlatan created so many goals just by himself last year. He didn't really get a whole lot of action. He was yelling at players that didn't give him the right ball. He made his own stuff. So I don't really trust a lot of the LA Galaxy when it comes to midfielders except for Pavone. I honestly think that going back to Quintero at Houston, I think he's going to light up. The dude takes PKs. He has great service. He can take some free kicks. That'll be something interesting to see if those guys, going forward gets fouled and what's going to happen with him. Can't sleep on Atuesta, guys. Atuesta had unbelievable season last year, stepping up from his beginning season with LAFC. And if that just continues, all those ancillary points, there's just so much stuff that he does. It may be another one that it's going to start at first. Going back to what you were saying with Nico, I think that Nico's injury isn't going to be that big of a deal. It's tendonitis, and to be honest, we haven't shown that we've put all our cards into CCL. And I think that him being one of our DPs on the Seattle side, that he will honestly just be very careful and care more about those first 5 games at home and starting off right. That's kind of been the Seattle's motto since Garth Lagerwey has taken over, is let's start getting points right off the bat. And that priority, I think, for Nico will be MLS instead of CCL. I think another interesting player is a DP signing at a defensive spot. Would be Joao Paulo, who's another Sounders FC player. He may be really low in points because he's unknown, but the guy in preseason has been launching long balls like it's nobody's business, creating those secondary assists that Matt can't stand. And I think that, to be honest, he could be an Aussie type where get a lot of those defensive tackles, but then also can get some good service. He'll also be taking corner kicks and free kicks. And we don't really have a PK taker that's just a solid guy, so that may be something going forward too. So yeah, my number one though would be Pavone, LA Galaxy.
All right, Matt, you like second assist, but who do you like for midfield?
Christian Pavone, for the reasons that everybody else said, kind of similarly, there's going to be a number of really good options as far as midfielders for LAFC. I think Atuesta would be a really, really good shout. I'd say Mark Anthony Case. So any one of those, 3 who's starting on a regular basis are going to be a really good option. I'm probably just going to play it based on who's starting and then who's the cheapest option that I have. I'm not sold on them from a fantasy standpoint or a playoff standpoint, but the one guarantee that you have with RSL is that Albert Rusnak is going to be doing most of the attacking stuff. So I figured he's going to get a lot of points, even if RSL isn't going to be a good fantasy team. And then I'd say the same thing of Gutierrez with Sporting Kansas City as far as midfielders, and kind of similar to the concerns that we have about what Ladero looks like from a health standpoint, and then also just how much Seattle is choosing to prioritize CCL versus the league. I think one of Valerio Ladero are going to be excellent, but I've got concerns about both of them. But I think one of those 2 is going to be my 5th choice option that I have.
Blayne.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got Pavone and Ladero, so I'll go with 5 little bit different ones. I think Blessing's going to have his breakout year this year with LAFC. I think he's just going to light it up. Lee Wynn's not there anymore. It's wide open for somebody to take that spot, and I think he's just going to come in and show what he can do. I've also got Gutierrez from Kansas City. He's been the most consistent midfielder they've had the last 2 seasons. Rusnak is also a home game. He's almost a must-have at this point. And then 2 guys that I think are up and coming. I'm not sure if Ferreira for Dallas is going to be listed as a forward or a midfielder. He kind of played a lot up top last year, but Doyle's got him in at the number 10 slot. So it kind of depends on where they put him. But either way, he was lighting it up last year. I think he's going to be critical to the way Dallas plays. And then Kevin Molino up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
If he's healthy this year, if he's playing, which I haven't heard anything that he's got an injury still, it's just how fast can he get up to game speed? If he is healthy, he is going to be the man running that offense this year. And you can't sleep on that.
Yeah, well said. You guys have covered pretty much all I have on here. The only one that I will add is I like Sebastian Blanco over Valeri if you're looking for Portland. Very close in their production the last couple of years, and Blanco is usually a little bit cheaper, and he is the one that got a little bit more favored with the deal this year, so a little bit younger as well. So I like Blanco if you're looking at Portland. Otherwise, you guys have covered a lot of the main ones, so we'll just move right on to forwards. Spencer, let's start with you.
Yeah, so with forwards, obviously we could put the top 5 and we know that they're going to be 11 million plus. So I'm kind of looking at more of who did really well last year, still in the league, that was productive per minute. So the top 5 goal scorers as far as per 90 minutes, number 1 was Carlos Vela. Number 2 was Wando. Wando had a goal, 0.68. He had 15 goals last year, 0.68 per 90 minutes. Sam Johnson for RSL, DP, kind of a younger guy, also with 9 goals was at 0.62. Rui Diaz and then Diego Rossi were the ones that ended off that top 5. So if you're looking for like a guaranteed pick that more than likely they're going to get a goal, you're looking at one of those 5. But one thing that I'm super hoping for, and I got my fingers crossed, is honestly, I hope that BWP takes over Dio. And I cannot imagine BWP that had just one off year with Red Bull, but you look at his consistency. When he has a guy that can give him service and you get that man in the box and he scores goals, I think BWP could be a really crazy sleeper pick if they're going to rotate this in the first 5 games of CCL. That service, and him and Carlos Vela will be lights out together.
Interesting, especially if they do sell Rossi as well. Blayne.
Yeah, BWP was kind of my headliner for the little bit cheaper options. We all know who the big names are in the Western Conference right now. And there's a lot of new faces coming in too that are expected to make a splash, and they're all going to be in that higher price range. But BWP and then Baji with Nashville are 2 of the guys I'm looking at cheaper on early in the season. Baji's got the speed. I think he's projected to be the starter up there. If he's not up top, he's probably going to be on the wing. I'm expecting this to be a counter team. I mean, they've got a calm out there. It's just I expect him to be in the middle of everything that goes forward this year, targeted with a lot of long balls, and just I hope that turns into some easy early fantasy points for me.
Mike.
Well, we haven't. I mean, obviously, I would agree with some of the names that we talk about. We probably haven't talked enough about Carlos Vela because he's so obvious. But whenever he's playing and starting, he's going to be on your team. We should just remember that. The only other ones I would add is we haven't talked too much about Chicharito. I do agree that last year, Zlatan created a lot of his own stuff, but that's also because Zlatan is kind of Zlatan, and he just kind of does his own Zlatan thing. I think we might see a little bit better of a team from the Galaxy this year, and they just have too much talent on the wings and in midfield for Chicharito to not get service. And even though he struggled, even though I wouldn't expect him to hit Zlatan numbers, I still think he's going to be a really productive player. I think he may be just as good fantasy-wise as Zlatan because I think he'll be more likely to get some assists because he actually knows how to pass the ball as opposed to just shoot the ball. So that might offset not scoring as many goals as Zlatan. Other than that, I think we've kind of hit the big ones. Maybe you probably mentioned Kai Kamara in Colorado. I don't know if anyone has mentioned him yet. I don't think we've mentioned Rui Diaz or Jonathan Morris from Seattle. I mean, they're pretty consistent. Jonathan Morris has been, kind of came on really, really strong at the end of last year and then brought him all the way to MLS Cup. So we shouldn't forget him.
Matt.
When it comes to forward, that's the one position where I say for the most part, price is no object. So if I can pick a cheaper keeper that's got a good matchup and then a couple switcheroos to fill out my defenders to look at some cheaper options that are going to get clean sheets possibly, it is so I can absolutely splash the cash when it comes to forward. So I'm just simply looking at guys who I know are going to start, where if their team scores a bunch of goals, it's going to be because they're scoring a bunch of goals. So Carlos Vela, Alan Pulido with Sporting Kansas City, Raul Ruidiaz, Chicharito, obviously with the LA Galaxy, and then kind of a similar one where some of the other picks that I've had where this is a team that I think is going to do it, but there's a couple different players who could do it. At any given time, I think there's going to be a Houston player who's relatively hot, just given what they're doing from a counterattack standpoint. So that could be at least 1 week. That could be Quintero another. That could be Mauro Manotas. There's going to be at least one forward, assuming they don't have a fire sale in the summer, like I said earlier in the episode, who I'm going to be looking at seriously, who's probably going to be sub $10 million, unlike the 4 guys I mentioned previously.
Yeah, that's basically exactly what I have. Chicharito, Vela, Rulli Diaz, somebody from Houston, because as always, I don't know what's going on as far as who's going to be hot or not with Houston. Then, yeah, I had Pulido as well. I thought I might have been the only one with him on here. But, I mean, with Gerso and Gutierrez and Russell and Espinosa and all those guys in the midfield, I feel like Pulido is set up to be able to succeed with that team, with Sporting Kansas City, and they made a spend, which is something people have been looking for a while. So I think that'll pay off for them, and I feel like that could be a good player going forward. Don't know his value, but it might be a little bit cheaper than some of these other guys. I think we're all assuming that like Chicharito or Vela is probably going to be the highest guy in the game. So
yeah,
definitely cheaper than that.
Probably so.
Something right there. So
I think one forward who might be a little bit cheaper, who might kind of work his way into this conversation because he was pretty good when he came on last year, was Andrasic from FC Dallas. He was kind of he was a super cheap pickup last year. I don't think he'll be as cheap, but I mean, especially if Paxton Pomykal comes back healthy and plays the way he did in the first half. We didn't really get to see those two together. That might be a really good pairing.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, Dallas could do some interesting things they got a lot of youth, but
I'm really high on Dallas this year, which I didn't know until this podcast.
Hey, I mean that's just how it is. I mean you're just hypnotized by the Cobra. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
Over there in Dallas. All right, guys, thank you so. That's right. Hooah! Thank you so much for coming out tonight and sharing these thoughts. I hope everyone enjoyed it. A couple of plugs for me before we wrap this thing up. I will be announcing soon the new Patreon tier swag. That's right. There's going to be new things that you guys can get for the pledge amounts that you have. We got some really cool items that I'm looking forward to releasing that there. The tier prices I don't think are going to change, but you will definitely get some swag out there. So I hope you think that is well worth your investment and support of this podcast and this project. Also, starting this week, we're going to start releasing the team preview articles over at MLSFantasyBoss.com, part of our yearly fantasy primer project, just trying to get some fans giving you feedback about their teams to help new players especially, but even the returning players. You don't know everything about the teams you don't follow, so try to find experts where I could to help give you some advice about who to keep an eye on when you're building your first fantasy teams and throughout the year. So that's what I have. No news about the game just yet, so I'm going to throw it over to you guys to give any other plugs or shout outs or things that you might want to do. Spencer.
Yeah, for sure. Representing my wife, obviously. Hopefully I can beat her this year and then put her in her place. But no, definitely shout out to Switch the Pitch, formerly MLS Female. Check it out. There's a lot of really good writers. They've got some awesome articles on the teams from a little bit of a different perspective. Yeah, and we are the reigning champs. The MLS Cup ball is in our colors. So good luck to everybody else this year. It's going to be awesome.
You'll notice I've updated my, there we go, scarf in the middle of my rack. It is, that middle spot is always reserved for the current MLS championship, and I have swapped that out with a nice little Seattle scarf. So there we go.
Pretty crazy, just to finish off, that the last 4 Western Conference MLS Cup final representatives have been Seattle or Portland, guys. So don't count out the Pacific Northwest.
Blayne.
Yeah, just a big shout out to the community. This is why we do it. We're glad to be getting back into it. I know I'm happy to be here. Throw your feedback at us. Hit us up with whatever questions you've got. I mean, you guys are the reason we do it, and that's why I'm here again.
Mike.
I'm just gonna give a shout out to my son. I was late because I was at my son's first soccer game. He scored a hat trick. So
Oh!
so now he's gonna be insufferable for the rest of his life.
Yes.
So
What's his fantasy value gonna be?
you know what? If he keeps playing against the team he played today, he's gonna be
I'll
Val-esque.
tell you one thing. He's going up 0.5 million
He's going up
tonight.
0.5.
That's what's going on.
He
Matt.
started off as a left back, was moved to left winger, and then ended up as a center forward because he just kept running around and doing these like ridiculous short angle goals.
Next stop, Bayern Munich. I think that's the way
Yeah.
that path works out. Matt.
Okay, check out my written content at lastwordonsoccer.com. Lots of great insight going into the start of the season on both the Los Angeles Galaxy and the Colorado Rapids. And then, of course, check out me and Rabbi at Holding the High Line with Rabbi and Red at Rapids96 Podcast on all social media platforms. And we're on pretty much any podcatcher you've had. Last year, we got pretty regularly at least one person who was a fan of the team that the Rapids were either playing the week before or the week after, commenting that, like, we were the outlet they were looking at podcast-wise as far as Rapids insight. So hoping to keep that going strong. So first of all, if you're listening to this and you're a Rapids fan, you haven't heard about us. Have you not had internet access until this past week? And then if you're not, certainly I would say that we are aspiring to be the go-to place for my team's playing the Rapids this week. Let me listen to this week's episode of HTHL.
Yeah, no, that would be really crazy if they had not, because I mean the Burgundy Wave is a great supporter of retweeting and just helping spread our podcast as well. So yeah, totally, it's awesome. I've been to the Colorado Stadium to see an MLS All-Star game as well, so it's a fun time as well. So great memories from Colorado. As myself, of course, as you already heard, you can catch everything I do over at MLSFantasyBoss.com, but I mostly do this as well here. We have articles coming out. We have the draft schedule that's going to be out. I will be doing some writing for MLS Soccer as well again this year. Don't know exactly what's that going to be just yet, but Skylar and I both do some articles that are fantasy content related there. Also, please check out the subreddit for MLS Fantasy over there, r/fantasy, and then also the Discord chat is an amazing community. You can see some of that on the sidebar in MLSFantasyBoss.com, but also just straight up join the Discord group. A great longtime friend, Older Goaler from Toronto, manages that, and he does an amazing job with that community. Lots of great insights, lots of great players, not just people in the middle or the bottom like we're talking today, but we have top tier players that come into that chat and share their insights freely and answer questions. I mean, these are guys who are finishing in the top 10, who have finished top overall. So lots of great people. This is a fantastic community. Again, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Thank you everyone who was with us tonight. And also, if you do want to consider supporting this podcast, you can do so over at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/MLS Fantasy Insider, and so MLSFI, and you can see how you can be involved with that. So that's all for tonight. Next week we're going to be back with an Eastern Conference preview, so we hope to see you then. Good luck. All right, that is the podcast. Hang around. I guess I'll hang around for a little bit. You guys, if you need to go, thank you so much, fellas, for coming out tonight. If you have to go, I understand. If anybody else has questions in chat, I'll be on here for a little bit longer before I start editing. This one went a little bit long, which I think we all expected for a preview episode, but yeah, that's how it is. Fun time, Spencer? Your first time?
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. This has been super, super cool. I'm not the expert that you expected, but I hope that I'm the expert you deserved.
I gotta make a note to put that in like an intro sometime.
All right, guys. Reid, I got to go
needs to be
write
our
those
motto.
articles that I promised you.
Oh,
All right, see you,
awesome.
man.
Take it easy, man. All right. Well, no chats tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and stop
That
this.
needs to be our motto, not the experts.